Well, happy Monday. It's February 23rd, 2026, day 43 of the 60-day regular legislative session in Olympia. There are 17 days remaining in session. And in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, we're going to preview tomorrow's big deal public hearing, a second public hearing, at this time in the House, on the income tax bill. This is Senate Bill 6346. And over the weekend, I had a chance to interview former State Attorney General Rob McKenna, who served 2 terms as AG ending in 2013, to get his take on the constitutionality of the bill, the fallout for business and investment from his perspective, assuming this bill does get signed into law, and of course then legal challenges, potentially constitutional issues. Also, there's a rally today here at the Capitol ahead of an afternoon public hearing on one of the most contentious bills of this session, and that is the bill to allow a state board to decertify elected sheriffs. This is Senate Bill 5974, the bill that Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank went off on early in session at its first public hearing. So we're going to hear more from him on that, and then share some of the rally with you as well. There is, in fact, also a sitting sheriff in Pacific County who would be disqualified in the bill should it pass because of his lack of law enforcement experience prior to being elected. So we're going to get into all of that today on this episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Let's dive in. It is tomorrow, income tax public hearing number 2, probably going to be packed. They put it at 8 a.m. in the morning, so maybe they're trying to discourage as many people from making the trek to Olympia for an 8 a.m. public hearing. But we'll see what the turnout is because we're going to be there. But over the weekend, I did have the pleasure of chatting with former Attorney General Rob McKenna. He is strongly opposed to the income tax bill, Senate Bill 6346, which, for history, in case you have missed this, it would impose a 9.9% tax on income above $1 million. So that's why the Democrats call this a millionaire's tax. But opponents, including McKenna, contend that if it's upheld by the court, it would certainly expand to include taxing income of much less than $1 million for the rest of us, eventually having our income taxed here in the state of Washington. So McKenna told me every 10 to 20 years, this is an issue that comes up. He is just brilliant on this topic, went well back to, I think, the 1930s, when Washingtonians amended the state constitution, basically saying that, your income is your property. And that is the contention at this point from opponents of this bill that say, without amending the state constitution, you can't just pass this because it is diametrically opposed to what our state constitution says. Your income, your paycheck, your stocks, your bonds, all of it is property. And that can only be taxed under our state constitution uniformly and at a 1% rate. Now, if we amend the state constitution, McKenna's contention is, we certainly could have an income tax in the state of Washington. But right now, we don't, because the state constitution says your income is very clearly property. So here's part of that conversation with former Attorney General Rob McKenna.
The idea that we don't have property rights and our income is ludicrous. I mean, you can pledge your income stream to take out a loan. That's what we all do when we get a mortgage. We're saying we can contractually obligate some part of our income and pay a legal obligation. You can have your income garnished, right? It's your property. Legislators today think, oh yeah, we can have a progressive income tax outside the bounds of the property tax rules, have to pretend income is not property. And that just doesn't pass the laugh test. Over the decades, legislatures have understood that, and they've said, okay, well, if we want to exclude income from the definition of property, we need to get the Constitution amended. And that's what legislatures in other states have done as well. Other states that have very broad definition of property like ours, that have income taxes, have achieved them by amending their constitution to carve out income from the definition of property, to expressly allow a progressive income tax. keeping in mind that under our Constitution, income is property. We tax property. We can have a tax on income. It just has to follow the rules for property taxes. It has to be uniform, and it's capped at 1%.
Now, supporters of the income tax claim there's no evidence at all that those who would be hit by this tax, again, 9.9% on income in excess of $1 million, that anybody would leave the state or move their business out of state or choose not to locate in Washington state. But McKenna told the Center Square evidence that he's seen from other states suggests quite otherwise.
We have a tax system that has attracted job creators and entrepreneurs, and it's kept our homegrown businesses here, as opposed to leaving. And they're going to screw that up. And I think they're panicking a little bit, and that's why they're changing the other taxes, because they realize they're having all these effects. Maybe they think it'll help reduce opposition to the income tax. I doubt it, because voters aren't going to be fooled by the gimmick of calling it a millionaire's tax. No one, everyone instinctively understands that this is the camel's nose under the tent. And once it's on the books, then they'll just start expanding it to reach more and more people. That the United States income tax was approved by the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1913. And in the early days, it only reached about 5% of the population. It was a millionaire's tax of its day, right? We've seen how that's gone, because once this thing is in place, and if they get the Supreme Court to uphold it, they inevitably will lower the threshold till it reaches more people, and they'll raise the rate over time. Look at California.
Okay, an interesting aside to all this, too, something we're keeping a close eye on today, is I received an email from a group called Invest in Washington Now, and they support the income tax. And they are suggesting that a large percentage of the 100,000 plus people that have signed in on this bill are fraudulent sign-ins. I want to read you part of the email I received. It says, there are 37,824 duplicates. They say that as of Sunday morning at 10 a.m., more than 15,000 identical names were signed in up to 100 times, resulting in, they say, these 37,824 extra positions submitted in the House and Senate hearings combined. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did speak this morning with Hallie Balch with Let's Go Washington, the group behind the initiatives, and Brian Haywood, of course, the founder, has been very outspoken critic of this income tax bill. And they are going to be issuing a formal response later today. But I went back and looked at the sign-in pages to see what the instructions are, right? Does it specifically say you can't sign in twice, or within a certain period of time you can't sign in twice? I didn't see anything on there to suggest that. And also, you have to keep in mind, none of these outside groups that are encouraging people to sign in for or against these bills are responsible for the legislative documents. That's all run, obviously, on the inside. And there are just as many groups that are in support of the income tax bill sending emails, because I get them every day, saying, signing in support. So there's going to be more to come on that. Again, SB 6346 is scheduled for a public hearing in the House Committee on Finance at the very early hour of 8 a.m. tomorrow. That's Tuesday, February the 24th, for folks who wanted to either watch on TVW, which you can live, or come down to Olympia and show your support or opposition to the bill. Okay, so now to this Monday rally at the Capitol ahead of a public hearing on a bill I described as being one of the most contentious of this session, which is Senate Bill 5974. This is the bill to set stricter eligibility standards for sheriffs and other police leadership. And the measure also clearly paves a way for the state to remove elected sheriffs from office. It would be the Criminal Justice Training Commission folks that would be responsible for potentially removing an elected sheriff from office. So there was 2 hours of debate on this on the Senate side before this thing passed on a strictly party line vote, not a single Republican in support of it. But Democrats argue this is necessary to hold sheriffs and chiefs accountable. And as I mentioned, opponents say, this should be the right of the people. Reminder that 38 of Washington's 39 counties right now have an elected sheriff. Only King County has an appointed sheriff, an appointment from the King County executive. So this one's going to be interesting. And as I mentioned to open this episode, it was comments from Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank that upset a lot of people. So encouraged a lot of people. He said some intentionally provocative things during the public hearing on this bill, suggesting, try to remove me from my office, and the people that put me in office will surround the city county building and, make sure that you can't pull me from office. So after he said that, the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs moved to expel him from their association, stating that, his behavior didn't align with their professional standards code. And so basically, Swank said they're irrelevant to him as far as he's concerned. And he says behind the scenes, other members of the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs are coming to him, maybe not publicly, but coming to him saying, we very much appreciate what you said and your, opposition to this bill. So this is what Sheriff Swank told me about that letter of reprimand, if you will, or expulsion that came from WASPIC. His response.
They're spineless. I went to a meeting when I became sheriff in January last year. I told them we have to fight this stuff. We need to stand firm. And a lot of these sheriffs who've been elected before said to me basically this: you don't know what you're talking about. I've been a sheriff for a long time. How dare you come in here and talk to me like that? And then I said this to them, and I'll say it again. I'm a sheriff of 1 million people. You're a sheriff of 50,000 people, right? You're a sheriff in a conservative area. It's easy for you to run. I ran a nonpartisan, and everybody was against me all the politicians were against me except for a few. And I won it. I won the biggest race of any conservative in Washington State for decades because it's bigger than a congressional seat, right? So, but these guys don't want to take my advice and listen to me. However, after this speech, now look what some of them are doing. Some of them are coming out and saying, never give up your right to vote for your sheriff. And hey, welcome to the party. Welcome to the club, right? Come join me and push back and fight.
So the public hearing on 5974 this afternoon here at the Capitol. I'm headed back over to the hearing room, so I'll bring you an update on that tomorrow for sure. If it's as interesting at all or even close to it as the public hearing that took place early in session on the Senate side, it's sure to be a good time. So that is it for this episode of Washington in Focus Daily for February the 23rd. Again, tomorrow is income tax bill public hearing number 2. I expect it's going to be packed early in the day, 8 a.m. hearing, but we're going to be down here bright and early to cover it. So thanks for watching another episode of Washington in Focus. Check out the Center Square Washington page for more stories on this and for my colleagues writing across the state. Have a great Monday.